He always thought his future would be something he walked towards step by step, one deliberate decision at a time. University, first job, promotions, maybe a family. A quieter life. It wasn't a dream made of fireworks. It was a blueprint, logical and safe. He believed that as long as he stayed within those lines, nothing truly unexpected could touch him. He was wrong. The night everything began, he almost stayed home. Rain tapped against his windows. The city outside was a smear of wet light. His phone buzzed with reminders for an internal meeting. Not mandatory, but a good idea to show up. A networking dinner. A chance to be seen. He stared at his reflection in the dark glass. Tired eyes. A pressed shirt. The kind of face that blended isolé into a crowd. He almost sent a message backing out, but habit won. He picked up his keys. The hotel lobby was too bright, too polished. The air carried that generic, expensive scent of cold air conditioning and subtle cleaning products. He pinned a small name tag to his jacket and stepped into a room that smelled of warmed food and mild boredom. Nothing about that night looked different from dozens of others, until the air shifted. He was standing near a table, half listening to a conversation, when a current of air brushed past him. Carried within it was something that did not belong, a scent. It arrived quietly, without introduction. Not sweet, not loud. It was warmer than the room, darker than the lighting. It smelled like something private. Old wood, cool skin, a door half opened in a house that did not exist. It cut cleanly through the blandness and went straight to the center of him. The conversation around him turned into meaningless noise. He wasn't listening to them anymore. He was listening to the scent. He scanned the room. People were laughing, gesturing, checking their phones. No one else looked like something invisible had just taken hold of the atmosphere. But he knew, with the certainty of someone recognizing their own voice in a crowd, that somewhere in that room was the owner of that scent. And whatever or whoever it was, it did not match the script his life had been following. He felt, for the first time in a long time, that he was not in control. The perfume moved through the room like a shadow. One moment AD breathed the hotel's neutral air. The next, that quiet, magnetic presence would glide over him again. It circled him. When he finally saw the man wearing it, there was nothing obviously extraordinary about him. His suit was good, but not loud. His posture was relaxed, like someone used to being listened to. But the air around him was different. Every time someone stepped close to him, their attention sharpened. Conversations shifted tone. Eyes stayed a second longer. It wasn't his voice doing it. It was a sense that he was the gravitational center of an invisible field. The scent drifted from him like a signature no one could see but everyone responded to. He told himself he was imagining it, that he was just tired. But then he started to notice the pattern. People who spoke briefly to that man later seemed to move differently. Some walked away with a small smile. Others straightened their shoulders, sending messages with new urgency. Decisions were being made in real time, softly, invisibly, and the man in the center of that scent was at the heart of them. He decided to get closer, not because he had a plan, but because distance suddenly felt dangerous. It felt like the kind of night where standing on the wrong side of the room might have consequences he would only understand years later. As he moved through the crowd, that perfume grew stronger, then softer. It was not overwhelming. It was guiding. He reached the edge of the small circle around the man and stopped. They were discussing strategy, upcoming changes. At one point, the man turned slightly, and their eyes met. A simple, measured glance. But in that second, with the scent suspended heavily between them, something in him shifted like a fault line under pressure. The man smiled politely and did something unexpected. He stepped aside. The small gap he created in the circle was barely noticeable, but it was facing him. An opening, an unspoken gesture that seemed to say, "If you step closer now, you belong here." His heart beat once, hard. He stepped forward. From that moment on, the night did not follow his script anymore. He introduced himself. Quiet, direct questions were asked. "What do you actually do? What would you fix first, if you could?" He answered more honestly than he intended. The scent circled them, impossibly steady. At one point, the man nodded. "You see things in a way most people here don't," he said. "We should talk properly." "Not tonight, but soon." It was a simple sentence, but he felt with startling clarity that some invisible line had just been crossed. His future had been quietly removed from the place he had parked it and placed onto a different shelf. The rest of the night blurred. He went home later than planned, but everything was happening on a different background now. The blueprint he had once believed in was suddenly translucent. Days turned into weeks. He returned to his office, his tasks, his emails. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, there was a new tension. Then, the first crack appeared. A meeting he wasn't originally invited to suddenly included his name. A message arrived with a casual line. He suggested you might have an interesting angle on this. Though he was unnamed, it didn't need to be. In that meeting, people actually stopped to listen when he spoke. Questions were directed at him. Afterwards, a senior figure approached him. "Why aren't you in the room more often?" they asked. He left with his pulse racing and the distinct sensation that an invisible choice had been made about him. The scent began to show up again. In hallways, in elevators, in the lobby of another building for a meeting he never expected. Each time, it arrived unannounced, reminding him that his future was no longer his to control. One evening, months later, he was asked to meet in a different building, a higher floor. The message was vague. "We'd like to discuss what your next few years could look like." He arrived early. The corridor was silent. Then, from the far end, the air drew a slow breath. The scent walked toward him a few seconds before the man did. Warm, dark, precise. The man stepped out of a room. He looked up, saw him waiting, and gave that same small, measured smile. "Good," he said. "You're here. Let's decide where you're going." The choice sounded mutual. It wasn't. Inside, options were laid out that he had never imagined. Paths were suggested, roles described. He was asked what he wanted. As he opened his mouth to speak, he realized something frightening. He was no longer fully deciding. A version of him had been selected long before this meeting. That scent-filled room at the hotel had already made a quiet verdict. "You belong on a different line." He left with a new future tailored overnight. His title, his environment. The stakes all of it would be different. He had said yes, but it felt more like an acceptance of something that had already walked ahead of him. That night, alone in his apartment, he stood by the window again, looking at his reflection. The man staring back was not standing inside the same story. His life no longer stretched forward in a straight line. In the years that followed, he found himself in rooms where policy was set, where futures were rearranged. Sometimes, he would catch a faint trace of that same perfume. He would see the man who had once made space for him, now watching someone else, evaluating, deciding. He realized, uncomfortably, that the scent had chosen him once. Now, he was part of the rooms where it chose others. If anyone asked how he got where he was, he could list the usual things. Hard work, timing, luck. All true, but not the whole truth. The night that decided his future didn't look like a turning point. The difference was something no one could see, an invisible scent, moving through the air like a quiet verdict, choosing whose path would be allowed to bend. He never really chose that moment. It chose him. Without warning, without asking, and sometimes, standing alone after everyone else had left, with only the faintest trace of that perfume in the air, he wondered, was it luck? Was it fate? Or was it simply that some futures are not decided on paper, but in the invisible things that move between us, unnoticed, until one day we realize we are walking a path we never saw coming?